So we're here in the WiT studio with David Adamczyk, Vice President, Product at Booking.com. David, thank you so much for doing this.
Happy to be here.
So I want to start by asking you about, how you've transitioned from building Booking.com's rides product to leading in the accommodation space, right? So how has your experience in non-accommodation vertical shaped your approach to building these accommodation business or accommodation products? Like what do you carry from that into this?
Yeah, so in my previous booking life, I was working on the rides product, so that's the transfer product, but I also led all of our horizontal experiences, we used to call them, so that's the connectivity between the different verticals, so flights and cars and attractions and accommodation and so on. So what I've tried to bring to accommodations is, first of all, fundamentally starting with a trip-first mindset. So at the end of the day, as a traveler, I'm booking a trip. That trip might have an accommodation in it, or it might have other aspects to it, but that's the problem I'm solving, is organize my trip for me. Right. So within accommodation, we have to start by deeply understanding what the trip is and where it comes from. So that could be, I've already booked a flight on KLM, or it could be something else about the trip, and making sure that we bring that context into the accommodation funnel rather than sort of starting accommodation first, if you see what I mean. So I try to make sure that my teams always think in that way, which takes you down different avenues than it would if you weren't. The other thing that I always ask my teams to do is, so we built the rides product from the ground up. I was there on day zero, and we didn't have fancy things like account managers and stuff like that at the beginning. So our product managers and our engineers were in contact with our partners every day, and that closeness, that understanding of what their business is and what makes them tick really helped us find product market fit for our offering. And in accommodation, sometimes it can be easy to kind of stay in the head office because it's a larger operation. So I've really tried to make sure we break down all of those barriers, and I send my teams out to meet partners all around the globe, so they really have that sense of the reality of their jobs, so that we can do better for them. So probably those two things is what I've tried to bring that's a little bit different.
So it's interesting that you, this idea that, it's all about the trip and all about the booking experience, right? So the connected trip is a major sort of strategic vision for Booking.com and for a lot of the big players, I think, in the industry. What do you see as the biggest technical hurdles to achieving that sort of connected trip? Like connecting accommodation, flights, hotels, all of those in a single, seamless journey.
I can't pick one because there's multiple. So maybe let me break it down. So first of all, the way we kind of think about the connected trip theoretically is there's sort of two dimensions to it. There's one dimension which is the experience. So it's the sort of the practical experience of what I interact with on the app and how it works. And then there's another dimension which is what's the sort of the promise. Why do I come to Booking or somewhere else to organize that? And when you talk about technical challenges, it's experience, right? How do I make the experience really seamless? And there's a few different aspects to why that's hard. The first one is every vertical is its own universe, right? Of different ways of doing things, different data standards, different APIs, different service levels. It's completely bespoke to that vertical. So just physically connecting the data sets between attractions and accommodations is a difficult thing to do because they don't understand one another, and they never have been built that way by the industry. So we have a big API data standardization problem. We also have a user experience problem, which is when I think about connecting the trip, it's a very non-linear experience. So I don't just kind of go, bang, buy my accommodation, bang, buy my car, bang, buy my flight, right? It's you're going up and down through thinking about options, narrowing them down, reconsidering. It's a very, very non-linear thing. So we need to be able to facilitate completely seamless transitions between sort of more in the weeds tasks and things that are already booked with things that are not booked. And again, it's a big user experience challenge to solve. How do I enable that for the user? And I think probably the last aspect I'd point to, technically at least, is when you're out there in the real world and you're experiencing the real world, stuff happens in real time, right? If my flight is delayed, it's happening now, and it matters to me whether I can deal with it in 5 minutes or 15 minutes, right? And that transit of information between all of the partners across all of the industries is very, very, very difficult to do live. And what's happening on the ground and getting to sort of ground truth, very, very challenging. So we need a better way of exchanging that information so that we can all collectively serve the traveler in those moments when things go wrong. So if you want technical challenges, that's at least a handful of them.
That is, I don't know why I never thought of it that way, but it's so interesting what you said, that a non-linear approach to something that's supposed to be a linear result, right? A very linear result.
Yeah, and most OTAs and booking included, right? The experience is designed as if you're sort of on a rails, right? It's sort of get my search results, look at my options, and then book, right? But that's not the reality of how people organize things, right? So we need to change the way that the user experience actually feels to the user, particularly when they're organizing a more complicated trip.
Right. And within this context, so I guess within the scope of what you do, right, what are the top priorities that you're focusing on in the next 12 to 18 months? And how do these align with Booking.com's sort of broader connected trip vision?
Yeah, so I look after accommodation specifically, right? So, we believe that our whole marketplace, but definitely our accommodation marketplace, is really the foundations of it are ease and trust. If we don't have an easy experience, both for our travelers and our partners, and if we're not trusted by both our travelers and our partners, then we have no marketplace. So absolute fundamentals, ease and trust, and that's what I really ask my teams to sort of hold in their hearts every day and focus on in the near term. So, what does that mean? On ease, for example, we have a very, very systematic way of understanding all of the pain points. So we have our user journeys, we have all the jobs that travelers do, and then we have pain points within each job. And one of the biggest pain points that we observe today is, and this relates to that non-linearity point, is comparison. How do I compare A versus B and pick? So we think that just within accommodation, we can do a much better job of helping you to say, hey, should I pick Hotel A or Hotel B? And if we can do that well within the accommodation experience, then that exact same thing can lift up here into the trip when I'm organizing the trip. And if we build the technology in the right way, it doesn't matter if I'm in an accommodation-only mode as a traveler or if I'm planning my whole trip. That comparison task, we can just do better for the user. So that's one thing. And that's kind of ease, right? On trust, I believe, and we might get onto this later, in the world of AI, right? Real experiences by real users are the most valuable currency we have. So I believe that we can do much more with our user content, with our reviews, and really strengthening both the veracity of those and sort of certifying their truthfulness, and also just expanding the breadth and depth of that review content so that if someone comes to Booking, they know they're going to get real, truthful experiences by other users, and also that they'll be fresh. So that it's about what's happening now in the property, and it really is relevant to me. So those are a couple of the things that we're focusing on at the minute.
So just, comparing that slightly, in an ecosystem where, like Google and Airbnb and other tech giants are sort of blurring the lines between search and distribution and booking, right? So how does Booking.com differentiate its product strategy in terms of accommodation?
Yeah, so a couple of things to say about this. First of all, the lines are blurring, whether Booking likes it or not, it's happening, right? And we have to embrace that. So, for example, we all know that a lot of travel starts with social media inspiration these days. So we lean into that, and we're actually trialing our product being bookable on TikTok, right? We know that travel planning is often starting directly on the big AIs these days. So again, we lean into that, and actually just last night we've announced a deeper partnership with OpenAI where we actually show up as an app within ChatGPT. So we have to just go there, right? But fundamentally, how do we differentiate ourselves? There's a few aspects. One is, I mentioned the trust point, right? I think that We are a brand that's known for travel, that's known for real, truthful content about travel. And we think that if we do it right, if we use both the information that our hoteliers and suppliers give us and also our users give us, we think we can just give you a better sense, a better recommendation that's right for you because we're closer to the truth. So we just think we can do a better job of that matching if we do it right.
Is that because of because of the data that you have?
Yeah, so because of the data, and also because if you look at how AI models are built and whatnot, you do need to tune it to the different use cases to get really good results, right? So we believe that we can take these foundational models and augment them with our own experience, and therefore actually get better results specifically for the travel use case. So bring all of those aspects together, and we think that we should still have a very resonant and compelling experience, even in the world of all of these changes around us.
Right. And switching to like a product perspective, what are the top innovations today that are driving growth and driving innovation, and where do you still see room for improvement?
Yeah, so room for improvement, I mentioned the comparison point. In all of our research, that clearly comes out as a very big need, and it's underserved by all, right? Not just booking, but everywhere. It's just a hard job. So we sometimes call it, at the macro level, we call this the spreadsheet problem, which is if you've ever booked a complicated trip, you get 1,000 tabs, you get a spreadsheet, you're going, oh my God, how do I figure this all out, right? So there's an experience there, there's an itinerary building, trip planning thing which is not solved. And that is ripe for someone to figure out the right combination of UX and AI and chat and data to mash that all together to make something which really, really sticks with a traveler. So I think that's probably the most exciting, white space in our industry is, go and figure out that problem. So that's something that we're putting a lot of effort into in booking. But within accommodation specifically, we are finding really fantastic results from blending the superpower of AI with the traditional user experience that the users love, right? So it's augmenting the booking funnel with the insight of AI. So being very precise about, hey, I have a question about, will my family and my dog fit into this room? Or, tell me more about whether this hotel is going to help me relax. This, very specific questions, which are all about understanding this mass of content and matching it to what I need. We're getting great results from that, blending it into the normal user experience. Right.
There is this school of thought that says that the anticipation of a trip and those multiple tabs, those hundreds of tabs and the spreadsheet problem adds to the human experience of waiting and waiting to go on a journey, right? And if that's sort of solved by AI and technology, do you think that affects the humanness of the thing?
I don't think it does. I think the human aspect of it is the like joyful anticipation, right, of what I'm going to go and do, and it's that discovery moment of finding the thing where you think, yeah, I want to see that, I want to go there, right? It's not the filtering through all the 99 other things that you don't want, right? So if we can create those buzz moments more easily, I don't think we lose any of the human aspect. I think we actually cut the graft out of it, and we make the whole experience more delightful for everyone.
Right. Adding to that, what do you think are some of the friction points in accommodation booking, right, in the funnel, from search to payment and then post-stay as well, and how are you prioritizing sort of solving those friction points? You touched on some of it previously, but what are the main friction points?
Yeah, so comparison I mentioned, I won't cover that again. I think one of the other ones which we're working on very hard is search, right? So again, at the minute, the way most OTAs work is you sort of search for something quite specific. You put in your dates, you put in your destinations and so on. But the reality is maybe that's not what I want to search for. Right. Maybe I want to search for, again, take me somewhere which is going to let me cut off from all technology and relax. Maybe I want to search for, take me somewhere with 360 days of sunshine of the year, right? So this completely different dimension to discovery, I don't think has been solved very well. So we're experimenting with that and trying to understand how we might make just completely open free text search work. I wouldn't say we found the secret sauce yet, but we think there's a problem there that's waiting to be solved as well.
Right. It's also something that we've sort of brought up a lot at this conference at WiT Singapore specifically, this idea of selling vibes or reading vibes. Like people want to feel something, but they don't know what they're searching for specifically. Like what do you Google? Like when I want to feel sunshine.
Yeah, exactly, right. And that could be something that maybe isn't actually explicit, but it's something that we infer from the way that the user's interacting with us. Or maybe it's something that we can infer from their previous behavior, right? Which is like, hey, you always seem to pick an option which is like, it's this feeling of hotel or this style, or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's you always pick somewhere where actually it's got really fun stuff for your kids, but maybe the room's a bit grimy, right? And understanding that about the user is where we can bring that real deep understanding of the travel patterns and the travel needs to the experience if we make that data loop work well for us. I think for what it's worth, you asked about challenges in accommodation. One other that I'd mention, which I don't think is talked about so much, is regulation. So we embrace regulation for what it's worth, right? It's good for the industry, it's good for the traveler, it's good for the partner, but it's very complicated, right? And if you're a global player trying to manage, regulation, finance regulation in this country with consumer protection regulation in another, with a data regulation in a third, it's very hard to make those things line up and still be able to operate. So one of our sort of concepts that we talk about in our business is trying to sort of abstract all of that away from our teams so they don't need to worry about it. So we kind of platformize compliance in a sense. But that's a big challenge for the travel industry because it's inherently a international business. So we're always doing cross-border flows no matter what player you are. So I think there's a big problem there to be solved, which we can all work on with technology, but we also need to work on with our regulatory counterparts to try to create some sort of alignment of these different systems to make them a little bit easier to navigate. Right.
Switching from challenges to opportunities, what is a trend that you think players in Asia should be focusing on for 2026? So it's like in its infancy stages now, it's growing now, but it's going to become a big significant thing in the next 12 months.
Yeah, we've talked about this a little bit at the conference actually, but kind of wellness and spiritual type travel and travel for myself and sort of getting back in touch with myself seems to be a real big topic on the rise, and it's something that we see in Asia kind of more than other markets. So I think that as a flavor of travel is a really interesting trend in this market, which we all need to figure out how to serve best. But it sort of mirrors almost a pattern that I see globally, for what it's worth, which is essentially everything that was niche travel is now mainstream travel, right? So in Asia, maybe it's this type of like wellness break. In Europe, people are trying to find dark skies. Take me somewhere without light pollution so I can be like in touch with nature. In LATAM, it'll be something else, right? So it's about how do we bring those niches into the forefront and again, identify that I as a user am interested and then find the right place for them to go and the right supply for them, that matchmaking task.
Right. So in closing, what role do you see technologies like machine learning and generative AI or even conversational like LLMs and conversational interfaces playing in the accommodation booking process in the next 5 to 10 years?
I mean, for me, this is a sea change just as much as the mobile revolution was a revolution and the internet was one, right? This is of that magnitude. So for me, it's table stakes for everybody. If you play the tape forward, we'll have a generation of users in 10 years who've grown up with AI and have no other way of interacting, right? So their expectations about what our experiences look and feel like will be completely different to our generation. So I think we have to rebuild the whole thing from the ground up natively, assuming that AI is woven into every single aspect of the experience. And I sort of touched on it before, but my belief is that AI and chat and traditional user experience all blend together, and even multimodal, right? So voice. So I could be talking to my phone while scrolling through the results that are showing up for me as I talk. And that's the combination of all these three technologies to build just user experiences that simply don't exist today. And I think that's where we all head.
That's where we're headed. Awesome. David, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you very much for having me.